So first things first, as like anywhere and everywhere, should I say, there is obviously the consistently low supply is one of the key measures, particularly in the Central Coast, because in the Central Coast, really you have, it's quite a dispersed, large area. There's kind of some areas that I'd say are more your sort of key pockets or key distributor lines of the Central Coast, key parts where everything's happening. And then there's others that are kind of just, I'd almost call them like a semi-rural regional kind of town feel to them, so it's a little bit different. And along with that, like every other area as well, you have the need for demand from a wealthy income demographic. Now, that's not the same in all areas of the Central Coast. Again, there are some very just, I'd say, relaxed kind of coastal parts and very kind of just, I'd say, almost like more rural feel parts to the Central Coast as well, but then there's other corridors that are key basically to everything happening. That goes along with your access to high-paying jobs and transport. High-paying jobs aren't everywhere in the Central Coast. They're in a key few corridors again. Transport's important because the people who do work in Sydney and Newcastle will actually live near those transport corridors as well that aren't too far away. So that's what's important in the Central Coast for those reasons. Lifestyle triangle is another one, the distance it takes you to go from school to work to lifestyle areas and back home. Look, in the Central Coast, if that's around 20 minutes or so, I'd say that's pretty good. Most of the Central Coast, like people that live in the coast, generally don't like it being too much further than that. When I say work, though, if it is someone who is working a hybrid Sydney or Newcastle role, for example, you may have them 2 days a week or something like that, still train into the city or something along the lines of that. Like I'd call that still fairly acceptable for a suburb. Long-term residence, important one in the Central Coast, because a lot of these areas in some parts of the Central Coast are new and developing. So they're full of first home buyers and unknowing investors who are very highly leveraged. You idealistically want it to be a suburb that's been there for quite a while. The reason being is because not many, but there'll be a percentage of people that own their homes outright. There'll be a percentage that have very low mortgage, and then a percentage that obviously have a standard mortgage of today. The ones who have lower mortgages or LVRs and have paid their home outright, those people in downtimes won't be affected at all because they won't need to sell their homes no matter really what the interest rate goes to. So that's why it's important. Future infrastructure. Two parts of this. So first things first, it's key infrastructure, so particularly where the jobs are going and the transport are going. That's important. The future infrastructure as well would be to the new estates and new supply. So that's the first thing I mentioned with the jobs and the transport. That's good, and should I say a pro to capital growth. The second one that I said there being the actual, should I say, the new estates going up, that's bad for capital growth because there'll be more supply. Finally, school zones are important, don't get me wrong, not probably as important as Sydney or Melbourne or even some parts of inner Brisbane particularly, but still important. Like if you've got a good primary and high school in the area, maybe a good Catholic, and there's some private schools in the Central Coast, if you've got any of them, it's obviously going to help the suburb longer term. So you can't really go wrong if you've got all of those sorts of things going for it. So look, these are fundamentals really of good suburbs in the Central Coast. So just consider that when looking to buy there as well. Look, I've basically described the fundamentals of good suburbs, but now what I'm going to do is I'll get into the actual things that are actually really starting to drive this cycle in the Central Coast. Now, really, let's just start with the most obvious one. The first one is affordability. Now, most Sydney-siders particularly like living near the water because it's a harbour-side city full of waterways everywhere, full of really nice beaches. So, and not only that, but it's also sort of open parkland, it's just a really good kind of place to live. And the Central Coast has similarities to it. I'd say there's parts of the probably Central Coast that I'd say feel similar to probably parts of the northern beaches of Sydney, and there's probably other parts that would feel similar to parts of the Sutherland Shire as well. So affordability is one. I mean, for a comparative suburb in Sydney, you're probably looking at, $3 or $4 million. So in saying that, obviously it's a lot cheaper, and that's what's driving it largely. And also for investment, you get much better yields there and similar capital growth in the right suburb as well. So that's another thing. Huge supply shortages are another thing. The key suburbs of the Central Coast, their stock levels have just fallen through the floor, to be honest. Some of them pre-COVID, I mean, you'd see like 15 to 20 houses on the market at any point in time. Now it's like 5 to 10. So, I mean, they've like halved and sometimes even third and even quartered in bad instances, right? And what that's doing is it's just making people scramble over each other to get the right home. So those particular suburbs, I mean, that's exactly what's kind of going to happen there. Our lifestyle triangle, I guess that goes along a little bit with what I was talking about before, particularly with people from Sydney, Melbourne, investing, or people from other areas of the country that have the money. Quite a lot of them who are sort of in these locations are tending to want to buy sort of all in similar parts. So I guess in saying that's obviously quite key to, buying well here. Not only that too, but also lifestyle triangle in terms of the waterways, beaches, and all that kind of thing too. Really important because, I mean, you've got all the similar kind of, people wanting to buy in the same location. They want to send their kids to schools in those locations. They want to go to the beach. They need to get to transport and jobs. So again, that just adds more demand to the area, and that's continuing to happen in this area. And that's largely causing the supply shortages as well, the better suburbs. Infrastructure and transport, that obviously goes along with lifestyle triangle, but the key part of this that's driving it is the key changes to the government legislation, in particular, the transport-orientated plan, the low to medium density housing plan that's come up. That's changed basically a lot of what's going on. Where that is really is it's around the key corridors and the key transport parts of the Central Coast particularly. So that's another thing that's really driving the cycle. You've got a lot of developers and wealthier land bankers who are actually starting to buy here, and they're just holding this stock to then turn it into townhouses or units in the future. And finally, the lot size and location is important. So in Sydney, for example, lot size is just shrinking year after year after year. The places you can build duplexes on now are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is, don't get me wrong, it's good, I guess, for actually creating more supply in key areas, but the obviously backyard size is going through the floor. But also with that, it's also location. Now, Central Coast, you have generally larger lots. Like you can generally get 500 meters squared plus, generally 550 in most parts of the Central Coast. But like most of those you can actually develop on, so that's one thing. And also you get the people who want to have families that happily live there because the kids can play in the backyard. But location as well, I mean, it really matters kind of where you're buying in certain parts of the Central Coast. Like, I'll give you a good example. There's a suburb, I mean, I will mention, there's actually two. So there's one I'll mention in one part of this episode, and there's one I'll mention now. So that is Lake Haven. Not a bad suburb to buy in, don't get me wrong, but there is a part near Gorican there that you shouldn't buy in. The other parts of the suburb are perfectly fine. You won't have any issues there. There's not really any public housing. There's not really any crime or anything like that there either. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on. Sorry for me fluffing my hands around. There's a fly that's bloody bothering me here. But that's a good example of that. So location in the suburb along with lot size do play a large part as well. So that's another thing that's actually driving the market at the moment too.